this is Steve Longo, drummer, producer, all-around musical person. And we're on the All Over the Place podcast where the fun sanity never ends.
There's a certain moment, a certain magic to live TV where if they're genuinely breaking up during the conversation or during the skit, it does make it better.
Hello and welcome back to All Over the Place, the official podcast of Media Pub Live. I'm your host, Eric Pravosnik, and as always, thank you so much, folks, for liking, sharing, subscribing. We continue to grow. It's because of you. Greatly appreciated. And we've got a jam-packed show. We've got another special guest tonight for a threefer. It's a guest leading threefer. And first off, I want to invite Jim Culver, my friend and co-host. Welcome back, Jim.
Hey, how you doing?
Excellent. Yeah, it's a great topic tonight. And folks, as those of you who are watching, you see the Saturday Night Live logo. And now those of you who are listening on the audio podcast, you understand as well. And bringing back to the show, a friend of the old Radio Free Fredonia. He's been here with us on All Over the Place a couple of times. And Christian Toto, welcome back to All Over the Place. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Boy, you just mentioned Fredonia. I get all nostalgic on that. It's a great site.
We start getting liver spots on our hands. Let me tell you about Radio Free Fredonia. God damn it.
Yep. Happy recent birthday, Christian.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Yep. I won't say how old he is, but publicly, but I will say I'm pretty sure you have a painting of yourself in your attic that's aging for you because you're aging very well.
Even it is aging, so it's a sad spectacle. But thank you.
And another great thing that's going on right now with Christian, his Hollywood and Toto podcast over on YouTube, kicking major butt right now. And just you've been adding so many things to it, and just actually, I'm going to hand it over to you, Christian, and tell our viewers and our listeners what all's been changing over there.
Yeah, well, I went from audio to video because that's what all the cool kids are doing, and incorporating more visuals into the podcast. And also, I've been doing this new feature, which is on my Shorts tab. It's called Short on Hollywood. It's basically like the old, appropriate to the conversation we're having today, the old David Spade Hollywood Minute. And I read the headlines and I kind of add a little snark to them. And it's like my website, like my podcast. It's right of center, but not every joke is leaning in that direction. But I'm having a little fun with it. And I've employed my son, who's a teenager who knows all about shorts and cool things. And he's been spiffing them up and putting some fun sound effects and visuals and all sorts of razzmatazz there. So if you get a chance, even if you don't love my podcast, check out the Short on Hollywood segment. I think it's pretty good.
You'd be foolish not to, folks. And I'm inspired by what you just said there, Christian. There's a 13-year-old in the house. Actually, I've got a 13, 16, well, the 17, almost 18-year-old. He's already off to college mentally. But the other two, media savvy. I'm going to start employing them as unofficial interns. You guys want
Smart.
McDonald's? Guess what? You're going to be helping out bonus dad Eric, making the podcast look a little cooler.
Yeah, trust me, it's gold. It's gold, Jerry. It's gold.
When in doubt, bring in the teenagers for free labor and smarts, and it works every time.
I'm paying them, so it's.
Oh well, even better.
Oh, it's a paid intern. Those exist. Well, I'm going to stick with my McDonald's bribery. That's how it'll be for me. So. Well, folks, as we mentioned at the top, it's a threefer, and it's Saturday Night Live because the 50th anniversary, their 50th year is about to start, and also the Saturday night movie about the 90 minutes before this first show aired back in 1975, the original cast, it got bumped up. The reviews have been very good on it, and the studio's feeling confident. So we wanted, we did the Saturday Night Live musical guest threefer earlier in the year. Tonight, we're going to be going a little bit outside of the box. Everybody knows Eddie Murphy. Everybody knows Will Ferrell. They know the big names that came out of the show, the John Belushi's and the Bill Haders and the Kristen Wiggs. But we are going to be going tonight with our top 3 unsung cast members of SNL, and then our +1 is going to be our favorite era. Might be a year, might be like a chunk of years, might just be one cast member's reign on the show. But that will be for the +1. But we're going to get things kicked off with Christian and your number 3 or your number 2, whatever order you want to go in. But your first entry in the unsung cast members.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit weird for me because we know the name in this particular instance, but I think the fact that he passed away so young, really, I think a lot of us have forgotten about Phil Hartman. And I think that, he never became the big star. He wasn't the celebrity. He wasn't the guy who would anchor a movie, but he was, I think they've even referred to him as the glue on the show. He was so versatile. He was so funny. He was so quick. He didn't stand out at times, but he just held things together. And he was part of so many great sketches. And I really wonder what his career would have evolved into had he lived. Obviously, he was part of a murder, suicide with his wife at the time. So a tragic story off screen, but on screen, he just was so good. His Reagan was spectacular. And I just have the fondest memories of him and just about every sketch he ever appeared in. And he was a little bit like Darrell Hammond in a way, because he never escaped into superstar status, but I think he was just good at what he did. And I don't think you need to be a superstar on SNL to make an impact. Even Kenan Thompson is been on that show forever now, and he's never really been huge, but he's a long running cast member. He gets the job done. He's always solid at what he does. He makes us laugh. And I think that's what matters about the show. And I think we get the stars in our eyes at times, but Phil Hartman was just everything on the show. And I miss him, and every clip I see of him, he's just always spot on.
And they never wanted to call him Vicky. Yeah, I had to go with his great supporting role, and So I Married an Axe Murderer. Yes. So.
Yep. Yeah, that guy was insanely talented. I mean, just everything he did was funny. He could do. I think he really had a great leading role ahead of him in some show had he lived longer. And I definitely remember. I think it was my first year in college. I lost. Was when Chris Farley and Phil Hartman passed away, and those were two huge icons that I always watched growing up and loved. So that was that was tough. But yeah, I think he insanely funny. It's hard to capture exactly what was so funny about him. Like, he was just able to bring this kind of elegant wit to everything he did, even when it was ridiculous. And I think that's a rare thing. Maybe Steve Martin, somebody like that, does that really well, but it's a very rare thing in comedies. And yeah, he's very much missed.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it was something that I thought about before the show and I forgot it and just came back to me. That was it. Chris Farley was supersized and full of energy. Leslie Jones had this commanding presence. A lot of the stars on the show really had a shtick, a gimmick, a style that jumped out at you. And it was often divisive. Like, some people hate Leslie Jones, some people find her funny. Same with Chris Farley. And he didn't really have that. It just was pure talent, a pure ability to play different roles and do it so well. So by almost my not standing out, he stood out to me.
Like you said, he was the glue, and I'll get to him a little bit later in the show. But yeah, Phil Hartman, I remember exactly where I was when the news came down about him, the murder suicide, and just news radio, just where that could have springboarded everything. Yeah, he's definitely much missed. And on that less than somber note, up to you, Jim.
Okay, my number 3 is a very talented, but I think often overlooked individual named Julia Sweeney. She's most famous for playing Pat, a character that absolutely could not be on TV today, but she was very funny in it. And she didn't get a lot of recurring characters. She was kind of a background player, supporting character, but she always brought something to it. And she played a certain kind of character very well, kind of a little bit sarcastic, just kind of amused at things, but just always very, very entertaining to watch. And she never really, there was a terrible It's Pat movie after she left SNL that I think 2 people saw. And she really, she shows up on TV from time to time, but never really got any really big chances to show her talent beyond just the occasional TV appearance. She's done a couple of spoken word shows that I've seen that were really good. She did one called God Said Ha back in the late 90s about her brother's struggle with cancer. And it was her friend Quentin Tarantino actually produced that stage show. And but yeah, very funny, very witty, and obviously very bittersweet. But just seeing things like that just showed this depth of talent that we did not see on Saturday Night Live or some of the sitcoms she's been on since then. Hasn't really had a chance to shine since then. So
yeah, it's, like you said, she was just always in the background. But again, who knows what could have gone on?
Yep,
outside
absolutely.
of the SNL. Well, going to my number 3, I'm going to be showing my age with these first two, but it's you go back to the cast that shortly after the original cast left. They had the first year just flopped, and then this person came in the next round and stayed for 4 years, and it's Mary Gross, and she was just a lot of great impressions. She had a great Geraldine Ferraro. I loved her Dr. Ruth Westheimer. Absolutely hilarious. And when she would get going with Tim Kazurinsky, and great combination there. She worked great with Julia Louis-Dreyfus a little bit later when Julia Louis-Dreyfus joined the cast. You talk about things that wouldn't be allowed today, unfortunately, but they played a pair of Hispanic friends who hosted a TV talk show, and they also popped up on one of my favorite sketches, the Ghostbuster Show, with Jim Belushi. I love the irony with that. Jim Belushi, whose brother John had the Venkman role written for him. But he's interviewing them, and they're like, oh, no, we like the Black Ghostbuster. Things you can't get away with now. And I might have to bleep myself on that one. I won't, but society would want me to. But and also she played Alfalfa, which played off nicely with Eddie Murphy's Buckwheat. So, and who killed Buckwheat? Well, we now know. Spoiler alert, 40 years later. Alfalfa. Jealous Alfalfa. Mary Gross, loved watching her. And another one, Mary Tyler Moore, one of a great fit with a cast that had an Eddie Murphy, a Joe Piscopo, and then later her final year, it was basically the Billy Crystal and Chris Guest and Martin Short show. But Mary Gross still had a lot of good sketches within there. She's my unsung number 3. And Christian, down to you.
Yeah, this one's a bit certainly bittersweet because it's a recent diagnosis we learned about. But, Victoria Jackson had a glimpse of fame on the show. Her post-SNL career never really picked off like a lot of her colleagues. But, she was such a bubbly live presence. And I think the fact that she was the ditzy blonde may have been a stereotype, but she seemed to lean into it in a way that was joyful and fun and funny. She would do sort of irreverent sketches on the Weekend Update. And she almost seemed like she was working without a net. I like that about her very much. So, I think in more recent years, even as someone who's conservative openly, I don't always agree with her politics. I think they're a bit strident at times. And she was recently diagnosed with a tumor, which they can't really work on, unfortunately. But I think for a brief moment in time, she just added something new and fresh and just vivacious to the show. And I just, whenever she was on, it was always a little bit brighter, a little bit sunnier, a little bit sweeter. And I think that's, it looks easy, but I don't think it is. So for those reasons, I think she was always sort of second tier or maybe even lower when you think about SNL's casts of yore. But I don't know, she was always pretty good to me. So I think she deserves to be have a boost here and to kind of say, you did a good job and you were part of the great landscape of the show.
Absolutely. And also a quick heads up for you. She's in a movie with another former guest of ours here on the show, my friend, AJ Laird, a movie that was shot in Wisconsin, hopefully going to be released later this year, maybe next year. But Victoria Jackson had a part in it called Through Eyes of Grace, and little indie out of Wisconsin. So keep your eyes open for that one. Little plug there for you, AJ, and the fine folks over at Eyes of Grace, Through Eyes of Grace. So, Victoria Jackson did definitely. And always loved her handstands and watching Dennis Miller just rip off it. Definitely.
Yep. And I think the closest she ever got to real fame was playing Weird Al's girlfriend on UHF. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing an interview with her where they talked about that. And the interviewer mentioned that it had become caught on as kind of a cult classic. And she just kind of threw her hands in the air and said, "Yeah, I'm in a cult classic. And I'm not even in my underwear and my bra."
And I love that you mentioned the Dennis Miller connection because they were so polar opposites. He was cerebral and kind of cool and chic, and she was just everything but that. But they were great on stage together.
For sure.
And Jim, how dare we forget that fabulous movie with Leah Thompson And I think Andrew Dice Clay was in it too. Casual Sex. That's right, with a question mark. Yes, we probably should leave that one alone. The less said about that, the better. But thank you, Jim.
That might have been her biggest post SNL, or maybe she was even during SNL. Like that was a co-starring role, if I remember. Her and Leah Thompson. Right?
I think it was during. I think both UHF and Casual Sex were during her SNL years. Yeah, keeping busy.
She struck while the iron was hot.
And Jim, thank you for the gratuitous use of Weird Al on a show. That's what we do here, folks.
I do what I can. I try to work Weird Al into every episode if possible.
Well, if you don't, I will. And then here's the accordion right here. So, but Jim, now up to you for your second choice.
All right. My number 2 is Sherry O'Terry, who I believe is kind of an unsung hero of the late 90s, early 2000s era. She didn't, obviously, her co-stars like Will Ferrell broke out and got really popular. She never really did. She got into, Scary Movie and some other supporting roles like that. But she never really made it big. And oh my gosh, she was so funny with her recurring characters, like Barbara Walters, Adele the Office flirt, and I think there was another character she played. I can't remember the name, but this woman who was addicted to prescription pills and just would rattle on and on about all the prescriptions she was on. It was shaky voice and everything. It was so funny. And she just had this amazing energy she brought to everything she did. And it just consistently made me laugh on that show. So kind of a shame that she never really made it big after that. But yeah, really underrated talent, in my opinion.
And don't forget Judge Judy. And when Judge Judy came on the show to stand next to her.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah, she had so many great characters on that.
The lady on the porch, get off. It was a young person saying, "Get off my lawn," but no, get off my porch. Yeah, love Sherry O'Terry, definitely.
She almost she would be vibrating on screen. That energy that you mentioned, Jim, it just a live wire, and not in a obnoxious, I wish you would stop kind of way. She just had a pulse about her that was always exciting. And I agree. She's not an unattractive person, but I do think that Hollywood can be kind of crueler to female comedians who don't have that beauty to them in some capacity. I don't know. I mean, guys can be whatever. They can look like whatever, but they can be fine. But I don't know. I think sometimes the comedians who have beauty and talent on the female side, maybe they get an edge up. I don't know. Just kind of spitballing on how Hollywood can be so cruel.
I don't know. I found her quite attractive, but yeah, I always had a thing for Italians. So there you go with me. I'm a simple man sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I'm in love with a German from Chicago. So blonde, go figure. But going to my, I'm going to stay in the same era for my second choice. But he was on One Year Only, season 10, the Billy Crystal, the aforementioned Billy Crystal and Chris Guest and Martin Short, where they were the spotlight players. But Rich Hall, who came over from HBO's Not Necessarily the News. And I still quote to this day his impression of David Byrne. And it was the year that stopped making sense. One of Jim's favorites from 1984, the year that album came out. And you may ask yourself, why is this suit so big? I quote that constantly. And I loved his David Byrne, his Mark Goodman. He would whenever they do an MTV related sketch, he'd be Mark Goodman. He was perfect for it. What another other Paul Harvey, and his Doug Henning. I still quote to this day too. It's the world of illusion. That's and right. Yes, it was. Yeah, he just nailed it. And one of my favorite sketches, again, and this is a year where you're overshadowed by those three main guys, but Rich Hall always brought it. And the one that he was in, the Magic Shoes, where he learned that the mat outside of the grocery store where he worked and was getting picked on by Jim Belushi, he discovered that these shoes could open up anything. And he put it on the mat. And so he cut out his shoes and he put them on there. And there was a surprise waiting for his boss, Jim Belushi, with those magic shoes, opening something that he did not expect.
Did Rich Hall, Letterman as well?
Yeah, he was a writer for Letterman. I seem to recall him popping up like appearances on there. But just gangly guy, just perfect for a comedian, just funny dude. Rich Hall, my second selection.
No, I'm pretty sure he's still alive, but I really haven't heard from him or heard about him in quite some time. And you mentioned Not Necessarily News, which I used to watch, and he had this little shtick called the Sniglets, which were basically made up words that we needed in our lives, but there wasn't exactly a word for them. They were very funny. It had like the kind of a 15 minutes of fame for him, but he also was pretty talented too.
Thank you for bringing that up, Christian, because I forgot to mention the Sniglet. And someone I know voted earlier today. Would you guys say that Fun Sanity would qualify as a Sniglet?
It's in the ballpark for sure.
I will tell you. So we have a ballpark, Jim saying yes, and we had a no earlier. I'm going to call it a wash and move on. I'm good with that. So thank you, Rich Hall, for putting Sniglets and all those great sketches into our lives. And I will continue to ask, why is this suit so big? Thanks. Christian, to you for your number one.
Yeah, I was dancing with Joe Piscopo, but he was a big star for a while. But another female player who just didn't get her full due was Rachel Dratch. Listen, Debbie Downer is her signature character, and it was friggin' brilliant. And just, her physicality alone would sell the sketch, and everyone around her was dying to laugh and trying very hard to hold it in. But whatever she was cast in, she was always very good, always very committed. And again, I just think she was one of those comedians who didn't really give a darn about how they looked or about they would just dissolve into the character. And I think the great comedians just have this ability to kind of put away their vanity at all and just go right for the joke. I always thought she was great. And she seemed like a perfect foil for a supporting player, maybe the best friend in a rom-com. And, she has worked from time to time over the years. I think she was on 30 Rock quite a bit. But again, never really developed the following or the star power that she really should have, because she's very, very funny and very distinct. And I can't think of anyone else on the show who had that sort of quality to her that was curmudgeonly at times. It was dour, but also with a little twinkle in her eye as well. So always made me laugh. And again, Debbie Downer is the character. And I still watch it today. And remember, I show that sketch to my kids on YouTube, and I say, the show was funnier back then. Just look at this. Look at the cast trying not to laugh, and it's just gold.
Well, keep in mind that Jimmy Fallon was one of her co-cast members, and he'll laugh at about anything. But the rest of the cast too, they were always about to bust up. So yeah, when you're making a little feral great character, you're doing something right.
Well, yeah, that Disneyland sketch, the Debbie Downer Disneyland sketch, is legendary because it broke everybody in the entire group, and for the entire length of the skit, it's funnier. I was honestly funnier that way than it possibly could have been if everyone had kept it together. But it was fantastic.
It's a fine line, because when the sketch is legitimately funny and they're almost laughing, it's magic. But if it's not that good and you're still laughing, like, oh, you guys, come on, you're selling this too hard, I think. So but I do think you're right. I think when there's a certain moment, a certain magic to live TV where if they're genuinely breaking up during the conversation or during the skit, it does make it better.
And I'm glad you brought up her 30 Rock. I'm glad Tina Fey would incorporate her just throwing a little kooky stream of consciousness stuff. Yeah. So, and I also think she was, I think she provided the voice on a show with Jenna Elfman, a fantasy show. And it lasted maybe a season, but Rachel Dratch is great, even as a voiceover actress. Love it. Great call. And now, Jim, to you for your numero uno.
Okay. So I'm going to start with some honorable mentions. Garrett Morris. Who was very funny back in the 70s. Never really not a whole lot came of him after that, but he was great. Kenan Thompson, who's been consistently funny for the last 15, 20 years, but hasn't really broken out on his own. And Jan Hooks, who was great back in the 90s. So for my number one, if you want to talk about underappreciated, just in terms, he's not a nobody, but just in terms of his talent, his level of talent, and the success he's found comparatively, I have to pick Tim Meadows, because he was so consistently good in the 90s. He had so many great characters, so many great sketches. He brought the funny in everything he did for so long. I don't remember how long he was on the show, but it was probably a good 15 seasons at least. And I think he got one character, the ladies' man, that got his own movie, and people barely remember that now. But he was just hilarious on that show. And he's done some really good supporting roles. Of course, Walk Hard the guy who was always trying to get the main character into another drug or something. He did have some great supporting sketches. Mean Girls, the principal of Mean Girls was fantastic. But I just keep waiting for somebody to hand this guy his own show or his own movie franchise and just really show what he can do.
He did stand up in Denver recently, and it was a very enjoyable show. And I was thinking a lot about him, kind of in the same vein, like why wasn't he a bigger star? Why did he not break out? I think part of his charm, or maybe it's almost like a double-edged sword, he really makes it look easy. He's very funny. He's very spot on. He's very versatile. But there's a calmness to it. I don't want to say lackadaisical, but he just has a cool veneer to him that makes it look like he's not even breaking a sweat. But he's always good. He's always interesting. And and you look at his IMDb page, it's pretty voluminous. I mean, he works a lot. But again, not the superstar status that he maybe deserved.
I believe the word you're looking for there, Christian, would be not enough O's in smooth. But that's definitely Tim Mouse. And I was fortunate enough to see him and Chris Farley both. They're part of the traveling Second City troupe.
Oh, wow.
And before they both went on SNL as featured players, they came to my college, and just watching him work and just watching him try not to laugh at what Farley was doing. And it was Farley before he was doing his fall down, look at me, I'm fat shtick. But yeah, Tim Meadows was just as funny on that. So I'm glad to see him as your number one. Great call. Love it.
That's a great memory, by the way, seeing those guys in their formative years.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And of course that was while I was still at Penn State. I think the year or two after I left, both, Ty Burrell and Keegan-Michael Key were grad actors at Penn State 2 years after I left.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, I just missed that, but they've gone on to do some pretty good things. I had Bob Clendenin. Look him up on IMDb. There's some stuff for you. There's your homework for Bob Clendenin. He was my grad actor. I'm only going to go I've only got one honorable mention. But this was hard homework for me. I've loved Saturday Night Live ever since my mom and dad let me stay up to watch Carrie Fisher when she was on. It was Star Wars. I was a freak. They let me stay up and watch, but I've loved SNL for years. And this guy, just my one honorable mention, I brought him up earlier, drifting in and out with two of my other picks, and that's Jim Belushi. And a guy who had, unfortunately, to live in the shadow of John, who is, I think, the greatest SNL cast member, either him or Eddie Murphy. Those are the peak of that show and performers. But Jim, he was on for three, maybe for, I think it was just 3 seasons, but he drifted in and out of the 84 year, 84, 85. But he played a great everyman. He played a phenomenal Captain Kangaroo. And as I thought about it, he was great at a guy just going off the edge. Like when he played the super intense coach of the high school chess team, drawn little, the plays to run and the chessboard all there. But yeah, Jim Belushi just always was able to ground a sketch, playing a great Richard Donner in the Superman auditions. That's an honorable mention for me. My number one, I'm going to go with someone Jim brought up as one of his honorable mentions, Jan Hooks. And she was in a cast that, had Phil Hartman, Dana Carvey, John Lovitz. And she was able to have characters of her own and hold her own with every one of those guys if she happened to be in a sketch with them. Like her, and she played 2 first ladies, Nancy Reagan, and then she also played Hillary Clinton. She a possible first lady. She also did a great Ivana Trump. Tammy Faye Baker was great with Phil Hartman as Jim Baker, and Sinead Skinhead O'Connor, and just the Sinatra group. But no, she and just great characters, and just like was mentioned, just things afterward. But again, great on 30 Rock later on, playing Jane Krakowski's mom, and what else? She was on Designing Women right after she left SNL. But love Jan Hooks. And rest in peace. Great performer. She is my number one of the unsung cast members of SNL.
Yeah, it's a good pick for sure.
As soon as you mentioned her Sinead O'Connor, my mind went to Phil Hartman's Frank Sinatra saying, "Cue ball in the side pocket." The Sinatra Group. Oh my gosh, that was one of my favorite sketches of all time.
I'm looking at you, baby. I'm thinking that flag goes up. You better sing the old glory. Oh, it's not even my country. Sting, great. Oh yeah, we could probably perform this right now, but we won't, folks, because we'll probably get copyright trouble.
Most likely.
Lorne Michaels is looking everywhere, so I might get in trouble for this logo in the background. No, any press is good press, right? So, but now we're going to go to our favorite era, our +1. Christian, we go to you.
You know, you mentioned before the Jan Hooks and Phil Hartman and Dana Carvey and John Lovitz. That era, it's pretty magical, and it's hard to beat that. But my choice is that 84-85 season, because you had Billy Crystal and Christopher Guest and Jim Belushi and Harry Shearer and Martin Short. And it was a different kind of season. I think they maybe focused more on those, not on the live sketches, but their film segments, prior. And there's just a couple that jumped out at me as being so iconic. And one was the synchronized swimming, where Martin Short said, "I'm not an especially strong swimmer." And then there was another segment where Martin Short was playing this kind of sleazy snake oil salesman lawyer, and he was being interrogated. I think it might have been like a 60 Minutes type of shtick.
Nathan Thurm, yes, lawyer Nathan Thurm.
Yeah, and he was smoking, and that whole year was just so magical. And it was because it was just one season, and because everyone, I think most of the big stars kind of flew the coop after that and went on to bigger and better things. But just that little time capsule, it had such a sentimental value for me, and it just was so funny.
Yeah, Dick Ebersol, if I'm not mistaken, was the producer that year, and he wanted more of those pre-recorded sketches. And God, Nathan Thurm. It's him, right? It's not me. That's not what I said. Oh yeah,
it's just amazing.
And I'll say about that era, out of all the movie adaptations we got from SNL, we never got an Ed Grimley movie. I mean, come on.
That's surprising.
I would absolutely watch an entire movie about Ed Grimley. Like he was like Martin Short was so funny in that as that character.
I must say. Yeah, we don't want to wind me up with 84-85. That was my freshman year of high school, and on Monday morning, my friend John Everline and I, we would recreate half the sketches, much to our classmates' chagrin. So yeah, awesome call. And one I almost made, but we'll get to that soon. Because Jim, it is your turn now for your favorite era.
Okay, so for my favorite era, both in terms of the talent involved and just nostalgia factor, I got to go with the early 90s. I mean, just, in terms of just how many performers came out of that era, it was just an embarrassment of riches. I mean, Phil Hartman, Adam Sandler, Mike Myers, Dana Carvey, Dennis Miller, Chris Rock, Chris Farley, so many others. And wow, the consistency of the laughs in that, the characters that came out of it and got their own movies. And of course, just it was really the last really politically incorrect era of that time. So they could just kind of say whatever they wanted and make whatever sketches they wanted. And it was so much it was just gold. And of course, I can't neglect to mention Christopher Walken's consistent guest starring and
and Jay Moore doing Christopher Walken.
And Jay Moore doing Christopher Walken, and both of them just bringing gold onto the show with them. So, got to go with that one.
That's a super solid choice. You can't argue that cast was deep as heck. I think one of my favorite sketches, I think it was called Bud Gay. It was Adam Sandler and Chris Farley. It was like a rip-off of a typical beer commercial, but they were looking at dudes instead of girls. It was
Schmidt's gay. Yeah.
Schmidt's gay. Yes, Schmidt's gay. Hey, I'm glad they finally got the musical rights back on that, because they originally aired it was Van Halen, Beautiful Girls, and then every time after that, it was just some generic guitar riff. But I'm glad they got the music rights back on that one, because it's Van Halen and it's perfect for it.
And it was so innocent too, and so silly and so sublime. And then today, we probably read too much into it. Was it offensive? Was it problematic? It was just funny. They were just having fun. It was nothing mean-spirited at all. It was just goofy.
Right. it was, you could say these were jokes and they're not meant to be taken seriously. And that line was very clear back then, you know, and the internet kind of blurred it after that. But back then, you know, we understood it was all a joke, whether it tweaked us or not, you know.
And the last time we could have, you know, a Democrat president being made fun of. Bill Clinton actually reveled in Phil Hartman's imitation of him.
I didn't know that.
I don't know if we're going to want to have all those cheeseburgers. So, Mrs. Clinton, there's a lot of things we're not going to be telling Mrs. Clinton. Oh, did that ring true a few years later?
Age like wine. That line.
Well, Jim, I'm going to partially take it from you. I'm going to go, and this is your number 3. I'm mentioning Phil Hartman as your number 1 unsung. I call 86 to 94 the Phil Hartman era, and with good reason. Mm-hmm. And I think in terms of it being such a solid cast, and Christian, your call for the 84-85 season, I almost went with that. I still consider that my favorite singular year. But in terms of the show having an impact, Phil Hartman was just, like I said, he was the glue, and everyone around him. And what I liked about it was such a strong core cast that stayed for such a long time. And then Jan Hooks left, I think 91-ish, and then after the 91-92 season, and then Dennis Miller left about the same time, passed over to Kevin Nealon, who just grabbed the torch and ran with it very well. And I like that he was able to get his Mr. Subliminal included in his as his the anchor of the news, and then and Dana Carvey, and then when Mike Myers came in, and those two working so well together. Although it's sad in later years that there's such an animosity between them, or I hope it's been fixed by now. But yeah, and A. Whitney Brown coming in and writing, doing very well with Dennis Miller, and just the host you had then, and they always say that your favorite year of Saturday Night Live is like your high school and your college, and that was perfect for me. And I just the host there. I mean, you had Tom Hanks joining the Five Timers Club, and with and who brought him to who's the doorman to invite him in with Steve Martin and Paul Simon, Conan O'Brien, when he was writing for the show. And and Ralph Nader popping up on that sketch. I've hosted 5 times. Go away. And it's so much awesome. And like I said, Phil Hartman was the glue. And then like you mentioned, Jim, in the later years, the torch had been passed to the Sandlers and the Spades and the Farleys. And Phil Hartman, as we mentioned earlier, gone way too soon. He was SNL for me, and that is my number 1 favorite era. See, that'd be seasons 12 through 19. Amazing. Phil Hartman, rest in peace.
By the way, I think that fell into your area, 1988, which was the Dukakis versus Bush. And I remember some just great sketches that, at least in my memory, were pretty balanced in, partisan wise. Like they'd knock Dukakis, they'd knock Bush, but I just think they got great shots in on both guys. And it was,
John Lovitz says Dukakis. How am I losing to this guy?
Yeah.
Amazing. John Lovitz. Again, just that cat cast. Saturday Night Live, again, it'd be 50 years now. I'm mid-50s myself soon enough. And it's an institution for a reason, folks. And we just barely scratched the surface on this one. And Christian Toto, again, I want to thank you for joining us here on the show. I want to just remind people here where to go. Just very simply, HollywoodandToto.com, and be sure to read him over on the website there. Click on over to the YouTube channel and make sure you're just subscribe there. Get his shorts, fun stuff. And I'm never even thought about it before, but David Spade, the Hollywood Minute. Now it's Christian Toto with the Hollywood Minute.
It's great stuff. It's an homage, as it were.
Love it, folks. As always, thanks for listening and or watching all over the place. And don't forget, subscribe, share, like. We appreciate it all, and we'll be back real soon here on All Over the Place. Take care.
All Over the Place, where the fun sanity never ends.